Um, Hello, my name is Ryan Nill. I'm on the board of the Austin Cooperative Business Association, and I've lived in housing cooperatives for 10 years. Cooperatives are a type of democratically managed property, managed by its tenants democratically. And I think there are three main reasons why I and others have been greatly impacted by co-ops, and why I think co-ops should be greatly encouraged in the city of Austin. The first reason is their social impact. My first experience with co-ops was in the West Campus co-op of Arrakis. When I first walked in, there was a group of people studying in the living room, some guys playing some ping pong, and a couple of people cooking dinner for the whole house in the back in the kitchen. And when I immediately walked in, I realized that this was somewhere where I wanted to be. It reminded me a lot of spending the summers with my large extended family in Mexicali, Baja California, and it was something that I definitely thought was missing from my life, having grown up as a nomadic military brat. I lived in 10 different homes and attended 7 different schools by the time I was 15. So I really felt that the kind of skills that I learned in that social environment helped me become more socially intelligent, move beyond social anxiety, and I've definitely heard testimony from many other people that they've had similar experiences. The next impact is an economic impact, and a lot of this has to do with the social aspect of co-ops. For one, I mentioned community dinners. When you have people that cook for you, you do not have to cook. We also have people that do all the shopping for the household. So right now I live at the La Reunion Cooperative Apartment. We have 36 residents, and one person does all the shopping for most of the households. This saves a lot of time on trips, so people do not need to make trips to the grocery store or even need a car. And I'm sure you've heard that one of the challenges of living a car-free lifestyle is purchasing groceries, and that's something that we have really gone far with. Additionally, because of the social aspects, a lot of socializing and friendships occur within the community, so you don't really need to go travel much for community. And I think all that is reflected in car ownership statistics that the ACBA has gathered. The lowest car ownership in a co-op is the college houses, and they have a car ownership rate of 39%. My cooperative has a car ownership rate of 70%, and we're near Anderson and Lamar in the Wooten neighborhood. For comparison, 95% of Austin households own at least one car, and the average American household owns 2 cars. The average American household is 2.5, so that means 75% of men, women, and children in this country own a car, and that doesn't count the people that drive leased cars. Additionally, because it's democratically managed, that means that the residents, they decide where the money gets spent. They decide how much they're going to pay for rent themselves instead of having someone else tell them how much rent they're going to pay. And because people are doing these things on their own, people develop skills to lower the costs and do the work themselves. So some people know how to cook, some people do not know how to balance a checkbook. So you need a diversity of skills, and co-ops have a diversity of people reflecting those skills. And these costs are reflected in price studies that the ACBA has done. Our costs are 40 to 60% of comparable neighborhoods or of comparable properties in their zip codes. And in the community housing expansion of Austin, a co-op property that operates in both the Zilker neighborhood and the Wooten neighborhood, we're able to house 60% of our residents who have incomes of 30% MFI affordably. The final impact is educational. As I mentioned, people have to learn how to do maintenance and basic finance, but you also know how to deal with conflict, how to cook, how to be a leasing agent, how to evict people, unfortunately. For the larger co-ops, you get to be on the board of a large nonprofit, potentially a multi-million-dollar nonprofit, and work with staff, hire and fire staff. Personally, I learned a lot about democracy. I was really apathetic about politics, and I know that that's an increasing trend for declining faith in democracy, and I think that co-ops have kept me away from that trend. And it's not just us, the co-op community, that thinks that co-ops should be allowed more broadly in Austin. In the strategic housing blueprint, it calls for a reduction in zoning barriers, density restrictions, and mandatory parking requirements for collaborative living arrangements, and specifically co-ops. The Code Advisory Group recommended improving the co-op definition in the code. changing the occupancy to 2 unrelated adults per bedroom, and lowering parking limits. You, the council, have passed a couple of recommendations supporting housing co-ops in the past. For Code Next, we hope to see an improvement in the definition. The current definition, I think, would allow properties that are not cooperative. We suggest using a definition that emphasizes the tenant democratically managed nature of co-ops. We think that co-ops should be allowed by right in all zones. As it stands, we're worried that we could have a co-op that adheres to all the regulations, but because it's not allowed by right, then a neighbor could complain and threaten a co-op, whereas a stealth dorm that adheres to all the regulations would not be threatened by that. There are also some large holes missing in Draft 3. In particular, co-ops are not allowed in mobile home areas. Additionally, we want to see the CAG's recommendation of reducing occupancy limits to 2 unrelated adults per bedroom. Co-ops essentially operate as a single housekeeping unit, as I mentioned earlier, and this reduces the impact of occupancies compared to the same property with the same residents who operate as multiple different housekeeping units. Finally, we think that co-ops need to be included in the university neighborhood overlay language. They're currently not in there, and that's the language that gives UNO properties access to the density bonus and affordability requirements. I think it's an oversight because the definition was separated, and I assume that maybe the person writing it was not aware of that. So I think that's a really easy change. Co-ops are a tried and tested model of affordable housing. They've been operating in Austin since 1942. Someone earlier told me that maybe since 1930. They're around in many different cities. Madison, Wisconsin has co-ops written into their land development code. In New York City, Habitat for Humanity is developing primarily housing cooperatives. Cities such as Minneapolis, Ann Arbor, Berkeley, and Boulder all have cooperative communities. I hope you will incorporate these changes into Code Next. Thank you.
Thank you. Donald Goff.